recording, that would be perfect. And then if you still have any questions after the session, we'll drop this in again at the end. You can email offcampus@appstate.edu and we will follow up with you personally. So if you have any questions that don't get answered or you think of something a couple days from now, please send over an email and we'll make sure we get those questions answered for you. So enough of me talking. You're not here to listen to me talk. So I will pass it back to Carla to begin her presentation on off-campus housing. Thank you all for being here.
So now you get to listen to me talk. Let me start this slideshow. Welcome everybody, and we're glad you're here, and glad that we have a chance to talk to you about the topic of off-campus housing, which we know is a hot topic for App State students and families. So we will share some quick facts about living off campus in Boone. We will talk about timing, which we know that is a very pressing question. When do you start? When are leases signed? We'll talk about costs, and we will talk about resources for students to engage with their off-campus housing search and find a place that is a good fit for them if they are going to live off campus. We hope that you will encourage your students to use the resources that we have to become informed about their housing options. So what we'll be going through is kind of a condensed version of information that students can also access in different ways. So quick facts, we do have about 12,500 App State students living off campus in Boone and the surrounding Watauga County. It is about, at any given time, 2/3 of our App State student population here in Boone. So it's, if your student lives off campus, they are in good company because there are going to be many, many other students living off campus with and near them. Boone's rental market is very much geared towards students. The cycle of leases, generally leases will have a move-in date sometime in August, and that lease will run through the end of the following July. Pretty much all of our leases in Boone are one-year leases, so it is important to understand that when your student signs a lease, they are committing to a full year, different from living on campus, where I just had to change something on my screen that was in the way. When your student is living on campus, they are only committing to live in their residence hall for the academic year, but off campus it is going to be a one-year lease. We have a real mix of different types of rental properties here in Boone. At one end of a continuum, you might have a rental house in a neighborhood, or maybe a little bit out of town, where your student is living with a few friends. At the other end of that continuum, we've got big apartment complexes where your student would be living in a community with maybe 600 or 700 other mostly App State students. And then, variations in between that, smaller apartment complexes, standalone buildings, different locations. We have rentals basically ringing our campus. So there are many places where students can live that are within walking distance. A little bit further out, they might be taking the Apple Cart, which is Boone's free bus system. The Apple Cart has 16 different routes. It goes out to all the different neighborhoods where students live and right to the edge of town where some of the big apartment complexes are located. If your student chooses to live a little further out, which some students do, they would have to have their own transportation to get to and from campus. but lots of students use the Apple Card. It's completely free. You just hop on, and it's a pretty robust public transportation system for a small town. I always mention quickly how it works to apply to remain on campus. You will get much more information about that process from the next webinar or from speaking directly to University Housing, but I'll just mention a few things to be aware of. University Housing will open its REAP process for continuing students who would like to live on campus next year on September 30th this year. And it's a simple online application, does not commit your student to living on campus. It's basically kind of throwing your hat into a ring. And it's only if your student is offered housing on campus and then they choose a room and commit to that they have entered a contract with University Housing. So if there is any question at all whether your student might like to live on campus or you think that's a good idea to have that option, they should be sure to do the REAP this fall, coming up actually very soon. Tomorrow. I'm just realizing tomorrow is September 30th. So, and then the way that works with University Housing, they will send email offers starting in January as soon as students come back for spring semester, and that they roll through that pretty quickly. It's usually complete by early February. So that's just something to be aware of. What I say is, your students should not do nothing in the fall. They need to engage with this process in the fall, whether it is to apply to stay on campus, to learn about off-campus options, or both. So I say it's never too early to start researching the options for the following year. However, and we will get into a little more detail in the next slide, you should not feel anxious, panicked, rushed, pressured to find a place for next August, early in the fall semester, or maybe even not in the fall semester at all, which we'll get into. But you don't want to be passive, so it makes sense to start to learn about what's out there with the goal of finding a place that is a good fit for your student. Typically, the first step is an application, which usually involves paying some type of application fee. Those fees vary from $50 to several $100s. And with that application, you also will be submitting financial information. Almost every, if not every, rental company in Boone does require a co-signer for student tenants. So that's another adult, often a parent, though not always, who has the the income to qualify them to be the backup person for paying the rent on that lease. So you will find, I know I was a little shocked the first time my daughter, who was going to school in Richmond, Virginia, went through a rental company process, and they asked me for a lot of information. So know that's coming in some shape or form, that both students and parents will be submitting information for the rental application. Companies will begin accepting applications at different times, and we'll get to, again, more specifics on that in the next slide. Typically, sometime in the fall is when they are opening their process to new prospective tenants. And then it also varies when an actual lease would be signed. In what I would consider sort of a typical process, you do some research, You identify maybe a few places you're interested in. You submit an application, and pretty quickly your application is processed, and that rental company lets you know that they are going to offer you a lease. Um, and that can happen for lots of companies pretty quickly. Um, for some companies, there's a big lag time, and that can be a little confusing because a student has maybe applied to a place they think is going to be good, and then they've sort of forgotten all about it, and then some time passes and they still haven't heard back from that rental company. And it has happened occasionally that rental companies that have accepted a lot of applications sort of early in a cycle don't always um, offer leases to everyone that's applied. But in the ideal scenario, you will apply, you will already know you're interested in this place, you've done some research, and you'll apply, and you'll find out pretty quickly that you're going to be offered a lease. But ask questions. Do not be shy about, what happens next? When will I hear back from you? What are the next steps? Those kinds of questions. So this is more detailed information that I have been collecting for a couple of years. As some people may know, kind of coming out of the pandemic, we had a very tight rental market in Boone. Legitimately for one or two cycles, it was hard to find places filled very quickly. This especially impacted transfer students who came in kind of late and were looking for housing maybe later in the spring or the summer, but it impacted some continuing students as well who maybe hadn't moved forward quite as quickly. So there was a lot of concern and anxiety that was legitimate at the time about finding a place to live in Boone. That has really lessened in the last couple of years. And I have tried to quantify how this works so that we can give good information to parents and students about what to expect from this process. So the first, I've been sending a Google form to companies on my email list for the last few years. And there are about 30 companies on my email list, which is another thing I'll mention quickly. Often students just hear a couple of names that are, have kind of buzzed out into the student community, or they're advertising at a football game, and they may not realize that there are quite a few different rental companies in Boone. So that's sort of part of what I encourage, is just realize there might be some more options out there than you were first aware of. So I have this year heard back from 20 companies, so a pretty good sampling. I asked when they started accepting applications from prospective new tenants. And the biggest chunk of time is in October. About half of the companies who answered open their applications for new tenants sometime in October. Some do start accepting applications sooner, in September, and several open even later in the fall, or even early in the new year. One thing, though, that's a little bit of an asterisk is this idea of a wait list. And that's something that kind of cropped up during our very tight rental market time around 2022, 23, that I started to hear that a parent would call me and say, my student is on the XYZ wait list, and it was September. And I knew that this place was not full, so I really questioned how they could have a wait list. But what I've learned is, because companies do start to get inquiries kind of earlier and earlier some of them will keep what I would call an interest list. So they are taking names and contact information from students or parents who contact them before they've opened their formal application process. Now, what they actually do with this information varies quite a bit too. So out of the 20 companies, 15 said that they did collect names and contact information from interested new tenants before they opened their application process. A good handful of them did not really do anything with it. They just sort of had that list. A few of them said they would email and reach out to the people who had contacted them earlier to let them know the application was open if they were still interested. And then some of those companies did use that list as kind of a priority list once they knew how many of their current tenants were renewing and they started to offer leases. So it is a little bit of an added layer, but still really should not be anything to cause concern because of this information on the other side of the screen, which have also started to ask, when did you actually fill all your units for this current year? So in other words, right now we're in the 2025-26 lease cycle. And when I asked a few weeks ago, the 20 companies that answered, about a third of them had not filled their all their available beds or spaces or units. Over 40% did not fill all their units until May or later. And then you see these much smaller segments. No company filled all their units in the fall this year. So in other words, last fall, as students are starting to think about their housing for the next year, they're researching, they're talking to friends, but they are not signing leases and filling places up in the fall semester. There was just, I think, 2 companies that did fill in January, one that filled in February, a few that filled in March or April. But we're looking at about 75% of the companies that answered, which again is a very good selection of rentals in Boone, that either did not fill until the late spring or summer or did not fill at all. So my point there again is to just reassure you that although it really makes sense to get engaged with this process in the fall, that does not mean that everything is going to happen in the fall and you have to sign a lease and everything's going to fill up. Some places do fill up more quickly than others. So if you and your student have really looked at a place and it feels like it checks all the boxes, go ahead, move that process forward, but do not feel pressured to get everything locked in, in October or November or December even, because we see that places did not fill that quickly. The lease signing, as I mentioned, is a next step after an application and the application being approved, and those will start happening in the fall with tenants who have moved forward with the process. Some companies indicated that they don't start signing leases at all until the beginning of the next year. Lots of questions always about costs, and there's a pretty wide range of rents in Boone. It is still possible to find, $500 and $600 a month. That is becoming a very rare thing to find in Boone. I think those places probably pass through word of mouth, but they do still exist. but the high end has gotten much higher in the last couple of years. So it is not unusual for a monthly rent for, your student's portion of that apartment to be over over $1,000 a month or even over $1,200 a month. And that may include some, all, or none of the utilities. So those are important questions to make sure you understand in terms of what's included. That should all be spelled out in the lease, of course, the written document, but you would want that information, before you got to the point of, getting ready to sign a lease. You can see some of the different utilities that might be separate bills that the student has to pay. Parking is, an interesting topic in Boone as well. So traditionally, rentals came with parking, and that was not anything extra. You might have to pay a one-time, $10 fee for a parking sticker to make sure that, you're parking in your apartment complex and other people are not parking there. I have seen more recently more situations where students may have to pay extra for the parking. So that is just something to be aware of and ask about as well. Know that all the types of funding that help to cover college costs for your student can be used for off-campus living expenses as well. I'm not aware of any type of financial aid that doesn't cover off-campus living expenses. You don't have to get a separate special kind of financial aid. But of course, if you have any questions at all about how that will work, talk to the financial aid office. We do have some survey data from a few years ago that tells us that students tend to underestimate the cost of living off campus. And we ask them to identify their monthly budget when they were looking for a place to live and what students thought they would be paying for rent was not really a realistic reflection of what rents were available in the community. So this is just something to really think through. What does this budget look like? You don't want to end up, or your student to end up in a stressful situation because they haven't really wrapped their heads around how much it's going to cost. So we're getting to the resources. We have two websites, and I'm going to show each of them to you briefly. In addition to the websites, I also do typically quite a few presentations around this time of year. We already have some scheduled in the residence halls, which is kind of an invitation. I'll be asked to come and present directly, make it very easy for students to attend. I'll also do a Zoom presentation that will be advertised to all students through our website, social media, through the university housing, putting that word out on October 15th. And our housing fair this year is going to be on October 22nd. So the housing fair is the one time that the rental companies can come on campus and directly interact with prospective tenants. And we have had as many as 20 companies come. Sort of post-pandemic, so many things changed in different ways. It's been more like 12 to 15 different companies have been there, but very easy way for your student to walk around, get a lot of information all in one place, ask their questions, get a lot of swag, so much swag, talk to people directly. And we have a little survey for students who attend the housing fair, and we know that they really appreciate getting all that information really easily right in the student union, talking to people in person, which can be hard to do when you're just making phone calls, sending emails, waiting for someone to get back to you. So that's something that we would love you to inform your students of and encourage them to attend if they're thinking about living off campus next year. Let me show you quickly the two websites. And we tested this out before, so I am assuming everybody can see the website. So this website is run by a third party. It's a company based in Virginia that actually right before we ended up contracting with them, they were purchased by CoStar, which also has apartments.com. So they are tied into all the big resources for rentals. They create this website for us. It's the same company that works with a lot of our UNC sister schools, which was one reason why we chose this company. I'll show you a few things. If you click on housing, this will take you to listings of currently or coming available rentals. You can screen or sift them in lots of different ways using these drop downs, including the More drop down, which has a lot of different ways that you can sort the rentals. I want to show you quickly what one looks like when you click into it. So I'll just use Mountaineer Village, which is one of our bigger apartment complexes on the east side of Boone. So, they have populated this listing with lots of information, 58 photos, a video, 5 3D tours. They have a special that they are giving. They are still apparently have a few openings, which I think I knew about Mountaineer Village, and they're offering a $750 gift card for students who sign a lease. And you can actually sort by listings that have specials, and if they have a special, it'll be up here in this top area. So then you can see what kind of properties they have, what the cost is, a description of the property, what's included, and then I want to show you what this interactive map looks like. So you will should find this on every listing once you click into the listing. First, you should click, because we do have a section of the website for our App State of Hickory. Click on Appalachian State University. And then you can see that here is Mountaineer Village. Here is campus. If you click transit, you can see where the Apple Cart stop is, which is right at Mountaineer Village, and you can see that it's the green line. So that can be really helpful in getting oriented to a place. You're looking at the listing, but you don't know really where it is. The map is going to give you a lot of information. I'm going to get out of this. I will just quickly also mention, and I'm not going to go into it, but it's a very nicely designed roommate finding section of the website up here that only individuals with App State credentials can sign into that section of the website. So it is a safer, more focused on App State students alternative to social media, to Facebook, for connecting with people to live with. Now, your student does not have to have roommates lined up. Many of the rentals in Boone offer individual leases, which means your student may be moving into, say, Mountaineer Village, which is all 3-bedroom apartments. They don't have two friends who are sort of looking for the same thing, have the same budget. They can sign a lease to live in Mountaineer Village, and it is only going to have their name at the top and the amount of rent that they're responsible for paying. And the rental company will place other students or other tenants in that apartment. But for a variety of reasons, as your student might want to connect with people to live with ahead of time, and the roommate finding section is a good a good resource for that. So I'm going to quickly show you the other website. They have very similar names. So this is offcampushousing.appstate.edu. We are now going to offcampus.appstate.edu. Did that switch so that you can see a
Yes.
website? Okay. I'm really concerned always that something hasn't translated to the Zoom. So I run this website. It's much more sort of general information announcements. Like here, I put an announcement up for the housing fair. But I'll show you a few things quickly. If you click on this off-campus housing tab at the top, we've got 6 modules that are just, a quick way to sort of walk through what the whole process of off-campus housing looks like. Your student would get this information if they attend a presentation, but if they don't attend a presentation, they could review these modules and get, tips and information for each step of the process. And then the other thing I want to show you quickly is this off-campus housing information exchange. So this is a tool where students, if they click on Give Information, can fill out a short survey. They have to sign in with their App State credentials, so we know these are real people and actual students, and they can submit a review of their rental property. These are students who are already living off campus. If you click on Get Information, you can see what other students have said about some of these different rental companies or apartment complexes. I'm actually hoping this will be nicely revamped fairly soon by the IT people because it's a little cumbersome. I also fairly recently purged some older reviews so that it was, nobody could say, those are old reviews. That's not accurate information anymore. So some of them don't have a huge number of reviews, but I think it's worthwhile to look at as one source of information when you're doing your research. I just clicked randomly on Appalachian Management, which is a management company that has a variety of properties around town. And you can see kind of the general satisfaction. And then for more information, you can click on student comments. So that's how that works. And I think that it's one piece of the research, but it's something that's worth, giving a look. I just went back to the PowerPoint. Did that work?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Okay. So the only resource I hadn't mentioned was lease reviews, which is something I do through the Student Legal Clinic. And to make an appointment to review a lease before it's signed, your student can go to legalclinic.appstate.edu, and there's an interactive scheduling calendar they can click on and schedule an appointment either by Zoom or in person. And more students have been taking advantage of that, I think, because probably their parents suggest that they should do that. So it's just one more piece, kind of closing the loop on that whole process, is to review that lease and make sure, your student knows what they're agreeing to when they sign the lease. As a starting point, we're at the end here, but I usually start most presentations with students by asking them, what are you most looking forward to about living off campus? And then I also ask them the slightly different question, which is, what are your priorities when you think about a place that you are going to be living off campus? And just to help students think about, what's their vision here? What's most important to them? What are they excited about? How do they find a place that ends up being a good place for them? And I think that does start with them doing some processing about what they want and what's important to them. So that is, I don't even know what time it is because I just talked and talked, but that is the end of the presentation. I'm
So
going to
thank you so
stop.
much, Carla.
I'm going to stop the
Mhm.
share.
We do have actually one question that we might have you pull some of the slides back up for. We had somebody in the Q&A ask, does this timeline include companies who have renewal of leases? So I think they're kind of asking more about how does that kind of process work, about renewals, and just kind of
Right.
a quick little rundown
Right.
about that.
So I don't think I need to go back to a slide for that because I don't really have a slide on that because I did sort of start from the premise that your student currently lives on campus. But for students who already live off campus, that is also going to vary in terms of when their rental company approaches them to ask if they want to renew their lease for the next year. And sometimes it is very early, which is challenging because, you know, your student has just moved into a place, is getting used to Boone, you know, if maybe there's some transfer student families here, so, or just students who have been here already. Um, and then they are asked if they want to renew and they may not feel like they really have enough information to make that decision. So, you know, when it seems really unreasonable, the time frame, that's sort of an indication right there, I guess, of how that company approaches things because and there's no law or anything that governs when they can ask for renewals. It does really vary in terms of some companies bringing that to their current tenants really early, and some a little later in the fall, and some give more time. I always say you could ask for more time to make the decision. It never hurts to, you know, ask, negotiate, not, you know, hopefully not feel really pressured when you don't know enough to decide that yet. I hope that was the question that was asked.
Yeah, I think so. If not, you guys can still keep asking kind of questions in some Q&A. We do have a couple of people asking about clarification on the pricing of units. So it says maybe on those websites it says like $1,200. Does that clarify, or can you clarify if that means like per
Right.
bedroom, the
And,
whole apartment, things like
right.
that?
And hopefully on the website, that actually is clear because that is a sort of a category of information. If it is not clear, then ask, you know, and you can create and guests can create an account on that website, and then you access a few more features, like you can communicate directly with rental companies or landlords who have listed there through the website. I kind of encourage to call and be, you know, use the most direct avenue for getting information if possible that's available. Like with students, I'll be like, you haven't heard back from them or you're not really understanding the emails, maybe you should go to their office, you know? So go there, call, email is sort of the most remote way of um, getting information.
Great. We had another question that I think is a really good one to kind of clarify on is what do students do if say that they have a lease with a company that ends say July 31st, or if there's 31 days in July, July 30th to July 31st, and say that their next lease doesn't start until the middle of August. What do students usually do in between that time,
Right.
especially if they're like not renewing that same lease that would allow them to just
Right.
continue staying?
Right. If they were staying in the same place, they shouldn't have to move, even if the cycle would have a little gap there. But if they are moving to a different rental and the start date leaves a gap, which definitely happens, there's no they have to go home or stay with a friend or put their stuff in storage. This definitely does come up. And is something that students have to navigate sometimes in August.
Sorry, looking for a next good question. So we had a question about kind of more of like maybe if there's like a legal side to this type of question of why are students unable to like share bedrooms in off-campus housing and why it's like one person per bedroom and kind of more of a clarification on if it
Yeah,
would reduce the cost per person to
right. You know, a couple of things there. Um, the only students I've ever really become aware of who want to share a bedroom are couples, people who are in a relationship, and there are some rentals that allow that. You do have to ask around. Um, one of the things you get when you move off campus, it could be one of the main things you get is you don't have to share a bedroom. So, on our campus in our residence halls, we do not do a lot with singles. Really, a single would be a rare occurrence if you were continuing to live on campus. So that's one of the benefits of moving off campus, and not many people that seem to be looking to share a bedroom, but some companies do allow that. And I even have a list that I did compile it a while ago, but it would be a good starting point if your student was, looking into that, of companies that might accommodate that I could email them.
All right. So we had a couple of kind of quick questions. So are most leases individual with the student, even if they don't know the roommates that they would be living with? If you have a kind of a gauge too on like cost of
Right.
utilities per month, that's kind of another big question we have.
Yeah, I can't answer that one. I don't know, but when I used to do more even longer presentations, I would give a few tips, like you could call the utility company and ask what the cost of electric has been at that address previously. You can ask the landlord. It's set up in different ways. Sometimes the student has to really set up their own account in their name, which does allow your student to start to build credit. Sometimes it's a separate cost, but it's billed through the apartment complex. Um, so I don't know amounts, but in terms of, I think the first question was if your student signs an individual lease, but they're going into an apartment with several bedrooms, will they always be living with an App State student? Um, the only apartment complex in town that is affiliated with the university, and it is um, only App State students can live there, is University Highlands, which is also a good place to make a little note of because it is very reasonably priced and it is all inclusive in terms of the utilities. All the other apartment complexes, rental companies, they may rent to non-students. Um, and there's nothing that would like require them to only rent to App State students. So those would be questions to ask if there was some concern about like who else is going to live in this apartment. But a lot of the rentals are filled with App State students because we have a lot of students. So
Perfect. So we do have a question kind of going over the safety of off-campus housing and off-campus apartments, and just kind of touching on that a little bit. As how's that housing process kind of governed, and if there is in any capacity.
well, in general, Boone is, a pretty low crime community. So I will say those aren't usually top of list concerns for off-campus living in Boone. We don't really have like a bad area. We don't have a lot of crime. Of course, you have to be sensible. Um, but those aren't really big issues in Boone. Like I know, not at all trying to throw Charlotte under the bus, but I know like UNC Charlotte, they have a rating system that a lot of it is based on um, crime and certain security measures, and that fits for that community because those are concerns in the neighborhood, some of the neighborhoods where students live, but we haven't really had that here. Um, of course, it makes sense to ask questions, um, and ideally see a place as well. This is one issue I didn't get into, and it's kind of a troublesome issue for me. Since the pandemic, and I have my theories about this, there are a good number of rental companies in Boone that do not make tours or viewings of apartments available before a lease is signed. I will absolutely encourage you to push, push, push to see a place before your student and you sign a lease. But that has been a kind of interesting trend that seems a little unique to Boone from what I know just of my own kids living off campus in different communities as college students. So always ask, always push to see the place. If your student gets to know someone who already lives off campus, that's such a great source of information. Do you like where you live? What are the issues that have come up? Maybe you hang out in their apartment and you see what it's like, and it's like, oh, this place looks pretty good. And that could be assessing some safety issues as well.
Perfect. Let me see about the next question. I think we may have time for maybe one or two more, depending on the length of responses. So we'll kind of see. I will just like to make a note that there are a lot of people asking kind of about on-campus options. Our big suggestion is housing.appstate.edu. There's lots of information live on their website now about that REAP process. And like we touched on earlier as well, we do have that on-campus housing webinar that is coming, I think, 3 weeks from today. So there is that to look forward to as well. And then wanted to touch on too, we had a parent ask or a family member ask, can you go more into depth about what your role is in helping students look through their leases and things like that, and kind of if there's anybody else that students can go to help them through this lease, the legal part
Right.
of their leasing contracts.
Right. Well, parents should read the leases too. You might have family friends. So I'm an attorney, and when we do a lease review through the Student Legal Clinic, we literally look together at that document. Students may take the lead on how much depth they want to go into, if we're going to go through every paragraph, or if they have certain sections that they have questions about. So yeah, I'm not aware of anyone else on campus that would do that, but it is available through the Student Legal Clinic.
Perfect. Let me see. I think one of the last questions that we had is kind of about just re-emphasizing that timeline aspect of things. There are some people that have seen already that some places want, their applications to be in by October. Kind of touching on too for like summer 2026 housing for those transfer students that might be starting in summer. And just kind of any advice and tips about that.
Well, I mean, if you want, we can go back to that slide, but we have pretty detailed information about when. So because a company opens their application process, which we saw that, out of the 20 that answered, and I think it was actually 21, the majority open their application process for new prospective tenants sometime in October. That does not mean that everything fills in October. That's a first step of a process. And as we saw, about a third of the places still haven't filled, and 40% filled in May or later. So I'm not sure what else I can tell you about timing. I think it does make sense to ask if your student has identified a place they're really interested in and the process is not clear, ask. Because this is not intuitive stuff, and they are all somewhat different in how they do things in these first steps. So, what does it mean when we fill out an application? Or what does it mean if you take our name for a wait list or an interest list? When will we hear back from you? What is the next step? Should we get back in touch with you? What can we expect? Those kinds of questions. I don't know if that answered that question. I feel like maybe it didn't, but you could also call me and we could talk on the phone. 828-262-7094 is my direct dial.
Perfect. So as we are just kind of closing and wrapping things up, thank you, Carla, one, for being here. I know I appreciate it. I know everybody watching also appreciates it as well. And thank you to all of the parents and family members of the students, App State students that attended here today. I dropped in the chat Carla's off-campus at appstate.edu email. So if you do have any other questions, I know there were some questions that we still did not get answered by the end of this presentation. You are more than welcome to email her in that off-campus email. You can try your best in emailing us, families@appstate.edu, if you do have any other questions or concerns as well. Since Carla is the expert, I want to put that on. I can try to answer your questions as best as myself or Haley can, but we also
sorry, I clicked into the Q&A and sorry.
Yeah, you're totally okay.
I do know a little bit about the University Highlands lottery process, but you should call them.
Yes.
That's as far as I got. Sorry.
I will also say too that when we share this recording, we will also share the link and the information about the slides that Carla presented. So all the links that she had in there as well. We will make sure that you guys get all that information. We are hoping that we can get that out sooner rather than later. We can't guarantee. We're just trying to figure out how that process will work for our office and our team, but we'll make sure that you guys have that resource. But outside of that, I think that kind of concludes everything. So if you guys, again, if you need us, you always can just reach out to our office, give myself or Carla a call, or email us as well if you guys do have any further questions. But outside of that, we want to thank you guys again and hope you guys have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you guys.